Angela is amazing.
She is a member of our wonderful FIRE community, a longtime listener and supporter of the podcast, and she has her own blog, Tread Lightly, Retire Early, which has recently become internet famous because she put together a list of 100 women who write about personal finance, which is pretty awesome. We talked to Angela about life, FIRE, family, and everything in between. Can't wait to share her story with you.
Let's go.
Welcome to Fire Drill Podcast, where side hustles, savings, and creativity lead to financial independence. With your hosts, Gwen from Fiery Millennials and Jay from Millennial Boss.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Fire Drill Podcast. We have Angela from Tread Lightly, Retire Early here. Welcome.
Good to be here, you guys.
And Gwen is here as well.
Hello, everyone.
So Angela, let's have you start by giving everyone your quick elevator speech about you.
Well, I guess I don't know if I have like a specific elevator speech so much, but I'm 30. I live in the Seattle area with my husband and 3-year-old son. We both work, my husband full-time and me 80% time. We make just over the 6-figure mark with both of us combined, but kind of thought that we were really, really frugal, just looking around at what everyone else does. And compared to the national average savings rate hovering somewhere around 2 to 5%, we're hovering in the like 20% savings rate, which is still pretty awesome. But this past summer, we had a couple of months of really, really expensive emergencies. Our one dog had some heart problems and we had to do some repairs on our house and cars, et cetera, et cetera. And it just really, really added up to where we had a couple of months where we were spending all of our income and more. And it started to get really frustrating and scary. And I had to dip into our emergency fund a little bit and it felt really, really bad. So I decided it was time to really start looking at our finances a lot more closely. Since then, I did a no spend November and we hit just over a 50% savings, including a trip to Hawaii. And we've kind of been keeping that up from here on out. And it's just the more I look at our spending, the more I realize we thought we were doing really, really well, but there were some really big leaks in our budget because we don't actually do a budget. We just more work off the spend less than you earn mentality.
So let's go back to where your story kind of begins. So I know you've moved around a lot in the US and I believe your husband was in the military. Can you tell us a little more about your journey there?
Sure. So he and I actually met when we were 14 through some family friends, and we had a lovely middle school romance for a couple of months, but kind of moved on from there. And we stayed acquaintance friends through high school. And then after high school, I went off to college and he went into the Marines, kind of sort of kept in touch. And then he got deployed. We started talking a lot more. And eventually, after he'd come back, we started talking a lot more. And when he came back home to visit, we brought that romantic side back that had been dormant for 6+ years. And pretty much were inseparable, not physically inseparable because he was on the other side of the country. But from that point out, we were pretty much a thing. And I went back to school and almost immediately started applying for jobs in South Carolina. And a couple months before I graduated, I got an internship out there, packed up my car and left Oregon and drove across the country and moved in with a guy that I'd been dating for a couple months. 6 months later, we were married.
I love these stories. They're so great.
And now you guys have a house full of pets.
Only 4 these days. We have 2 dogs, a cat, and a corn snake. But at our high, we had 3 ferrets and a bearded dragon and another cat. So we had quite a zoo, but since we've had our son, as they've gotten older and passed on, we've kind of tried to keep it a little bit more in check, but it's hard. Every time we go to the pet store, I definitely go look at the bearded dragons, especially the ones that get dropped off at need homes, because I'm a total sucker for animals that need to be adopted and need homes.
So you guys went from a 20% savings rate to a 50% savings rate in just a few months. So what was different about your life that you made that work?
It was really a long time coming. Even like the last few months, I really kicked it up, but it really started kind of spiraling out of control as far as our spending after we had our son. The first year of parenthood was really hard for us. I mean, I have a brother who's 12 years younger than me. I grew up babysitting. I was a nanny in college. So I kind of knew what kids were like, but being a parent was a completely different experience than that when it becomes 24/7. And I went back to work full time when he was 5 months old, and life was just hectic and crazy. And so we spent a lot of money on food. Every day at work, I was picking up lunch, and most of the time before work, I was picking up breakfast because I didn't have time in the morning to get breakfast. And then a couple times a week, we'd be either getting takeout, or if you've heard of DoorDash, it's like a dinner delivery service. And that can get to be $50 or $70 for a dinner delivery, which is crazy, but it seemed amazing because they'd deliver you something other than pizza or Chinese for variety. And so we just started spending a lot of money on food, and then Amazon purchases. Whenever we didn't have the time to go out and look for something or shop for something, we'd buy it on Amazon. So we never got to the point where we were living beyond our means, but it was definitely shrinking our margin by a lot. And then when my son turned a year old, I actually cut back my hours to 80% time. That comes with a significant 20% pay cut. And we put him in preschool 2 days a week. So our income went down and our expenses went up. It took a few months and then the really expensive months to really have it all add up. So I started slow by realizing I really needed to get my lunch expenses under control. And I set myself a $150 budget for the month for just lunches for myself, which seems crazy, but was actually a lot less than I'd been spending. So I wrote it down and tracked it and eventually got that under control, and then just kind of coasted for a few months. And then, like I said, the really expensive months happened, and I just decided we needed to track more closely. And so in November, it was really writing down every single purchase as it happened. The $5 coffee, the $10 lunch, $50 brunch on the weekend. I just really started to pay attention to every dollar that was leaving. And I started cooking a lot more and baking a lot more and just using what we had and making sure to use all of the food we had. And went to clothing swaps for my son for the next size up instead of just going to Fred Meyer because it was easier to just go pick up some $5 items. But $5 items is $25, and then, $50 for lunch, and just kept adding up. So just by writing it down and being mindful every single day, our number for our expenses has just dropped like crazy amounts.
Do you use any apps to track your spending?
No, I probably should. I've had Mint for a really long time, but it seems to not be perfect. And so by the time I mess around with it, I just have given it up over and over again. And so I just use Evernote, which is basically just a note-taking app, and I just manually put it in my phone day to day. It might not be the most streamlined situation, but really for me, just having to write it down every single time I get a receipt has really helped me pay attention to where our money is going.
Gwen, do you track your expenses via app?
Not really. I check in maybe about once a week to see where my spending is on Mint, but I don't go granular like every receipt. Instead, I just try and, make sure that I'm like, well, I spent a lot on food last week, so I'm not going to spend a lot on food this week. And, just try it. It's basically a reactionary budget at this point, which is working out well for me. And then I reconcile everything at the end of the month.
It'll be interesting to see if that changes once you leave your job.
Oh, I have a feeling that my wallet is about to get wrapped in chains and sunk into the bottom of a lake. I think that I'm probably not going to spend hardly any money when I don't have a job. That'll be, really interesting to see how my habits shift.
I should have realized that for me, I have to track it that way because exercise and diet is the same way. the only way I'm able to keep things under control is using MyFitnessPal and tracking my food day to day. A number of years ago, I dropped 30 pounds in 6 months or a year just by tracking food and exercise. So I knew it worked on that end. For some reason, though, I just didn't get it through my brain that tracking my finances would be really just the same for me as exercise and diet.
There's a lot of similarities between willpower on spending and willpower on food and exercise. I do really well with willpower on money because it's automated and I can't do too much damage to myself because most of my money's already gone by the time I get to spend it. So that's awesome. And it means I'm really disciplined on money. But then on the other hand, diet and exercise are like really difficult for me because it's not automated. Nobody's forcing me to go to the gym. Nobody's forcing me to eat healthy. And so that's a little bit of an issue for me. So yeah, I can definitely see the similarities between the two systems.
I don't actually automate anything for our finances. I know that's kind of weird, but I guess that's where you need to figure out what works best for you. Like even our mortgage and our utilities aren't automated. I actually physically go in and pay them every month, which might be a little bizarre, but it makes sure that I pay attention to what they are and how much they are because they seem like fixed expenses. But I mean, even your mortgage includes your insurance, which you can go in and request quotes from other places, and your utilities depend on how much usage. So even the fixed expenses, by having to pay them myself every month, it's kind of a reminder for me to look and see where they can actually shrink.
So speaking of a 50% savings rate, using the shockingly simple math behind early retirement calculation, which is a famous Mr. Money Mustache post, if you save 50% of your savings rate, that means you have to work 17 years until retirement. But I know that your plan is to exit relatively soon. How does that add up for you?
Exiting's not really exactly our plan. I know it's kind of funny. My blog is Tread Lightly, Retire Early, but neither of us have any plans on fully retiring at any point in the future. I'd like to hit our financial independence number by our mid-40s, which seems totally doable because we're also not starting from zero at this point. But the point behind a high savings rate is being able to do like what I'm doing, which is not working full time. For me, financial independence is more about opportunities and options and not being stuck in my chair because I'm worried about when our next paycheck is coming in to make sure that we pay the mortgage and can feed ourselves. So I don't really have an exit plan so much, and I hope I don't ever want one. What I do is really important and it's really making an impact in this world. We work with a lot of subcontractors and that sort of thing. And I see a lot of people in their 50s and 60s who are really over it at this point, but they can't be because they still need that income. So for me, financial independence is a hedge against getting to the point where we are stuck in our chairs because we have to, not because we want to be there.
So what does it look like? Are you still living in your house? Are you traveling?
We definitely like to travel more. I'm hoping there's some way to make that work with our jobs because, like I said, neither of us want to walk away, but we do have a 2-week trip coming up in a couple of months. And that's really exciting because for us, 2 weeks is a really, really long time to be able to go anywhere. So if we could even manage to do that a couple times a year, I think that would really excite us. Maybe even a little bit longer at some point, but still kind of working out, even if that's a possibility or not. But as far as staying in our house, yeah, our families are both in this area. And especially when our son is young, it's really, really important for us to be where we're at. My mom and my grandmother watch our son on Wednesdays, and my mother-in-law watches him on Thursday and Friday. It's not just the cost savings, but it's the relationship he has with them. If I wasn't working or if we were living somewhere else and he just got time with them with me, it's not the same kind of relationship that he has because he has that one-on-one time with them. And I think that's really, really special and it can't be replicated. Beyond that, we do like our area and we're really lucky we bought our house in the bottom of the housing market because it's more than doubled in the 6.5 years we've owned it. So we don't need a bigger house. We're not looking to move But at the same time, eventually, would we like to spend more time in other areas? Yeah, but I don't know exactly how that looks yet.
So that's kind of interesting because you're pursuing financial independence, but really all that looks like is your exact same life plus like 2 extra weeks of vacation.
I know. It's kind of bizarre. I guess the point is more that I don't know what the next 10, 20, 30 years hold. And I mean, my life looks so different than I would have expected it to even 10 years ago, that by having a really high savings rate and by having a lot of money stashed away, we don't have to limit ourselves when opportunities arise. I mean, I was the person in college that I told my friends I would never, ever be married before 30. And eventually I'd want a kid someday, maybe. And instead I turned around and got married at 21 and got pregnant at 26. So I'm not very good at predicting the future for myself. So having more money and more options makes it so when things happen, I can react to them based on what's best for our family, not what needs to happen for our bank account.
I was just thinking about the chat that we had, the New Year's Eve chat with Erin Lowry, and her point was sort of, if your life is so much different after financial independence and you're really putting yourself in a hard spot so that someday you can achieve something that you perceive to be better, that's actually an issue. And you probably should try to work on your mental health and make your present day better instead of waiting for something in the future. So I think maybe you're living along those lines.
Oh, entirely so. Yeah. Well, and what I keep reminding myself is basically, if I won the lottery, how would my life look different? Powerball style lottery. Like if money was absolutely no object, what kind of life would I live differently? And if it's significantly different than what I'm doing today, then yeah, there's something wrong. I think that's kind of a fatal flaw with the FIRE movement, is the idea of just putting your head down and grinding away some absolutely wonderful years of your life so that someday you can do something else. I think it's different if it's a short period to get to something better, but we talked about our FI date is, 10, 15 years out. If we have to go back to work full time and make us miserable, and I could get there sooner, but I would rather, we go on trips every month, be them big ones or little ones, and we spend more money on travel and on restaurants when we're traveling than we absolutely need to. I mean, last month we spent $1,000 on the two. Between that and going back to full time, I could reach FI way, way sooner. So I actually hate the Dave Ramsey quote, live like no one today so you can live like no one else tomorrow. It really encourages the absolute deprivation, gazelle mode, be miserable so that your life looks better later. And I've known too many people, albeit closely or not closely, that have done that sort of thing and their life has been cut short. Either they've passed away or they have some sort of physical situation that makes them not be able to do what they want to do once they're at that point. No amount of time is guaranteed. It doesn't mean YOLO and go spend all your money, because percentagely the odds are good that you're going to still be here in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. But at the same time, don't waste your years doing something you're absolutely miserable doing. It's just not worth it.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I got away from doing the whole early retirement thing, and now I'm doing the FI thing, because I realized that if I had the opportunity to make my life amazing right now, then why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I take the chance and quit work and go into work for myself instead of grinding it out for the next 7 or 8 years or whatever it would be until I hit my FI number?
That's exactly how I feel. If it was 7 or 8 months, then I'd tell you just hit it hard and you can do anything for a year. But when you're talking more than a year, when you're talking that many hours and days and months of your life, enjoy yourself. Make sure you're living a life that doesn't suck.
Now that I love my job, it makes it so much easier.
Yeah, I think that might be part of it too, is that I know what it's like to have a job that I love and to have a job that I don't hate Monday mornings, that Sunday I don't, people talk about the Sunday dread or whatever, and I don't have that. So maybe that's why I'm more like, no, like enjoy yourself, enjoy your work, because I know that it can be good and it can be balanced. But getting off around 2 o'clock every day because I have a reduced schedule also makes that so that my weekdays are a heck of a lot better. They're not just get up, go to work, get home, make dinner, go to bed. My son and I go to the park. We go hang out with friends. I have time to take my dog to the vet, get all of our errands done. And then our weekends are totally free and not filled with chores and errands and running around. So we aren't just living for the big long vacations. We've got good that happens every day.
That's awesome. You know, as we're talking about this now, I'm wondering though, should people still plan for early retirement though, because you don't know if you're gonna have a medical issue?
Well, and it's not just medical. I mean, you never know when the job changes and it's suddenly something either you don't like or somebody comes along and you just really cannot work with them, or you need to move for a certain reason, or you have someone else that you need to take care of because of a medical issue. I mean, there are so many different reasons why banking on being able to do your work for 40 years is just, I like to hedge my bets. I'm not a betting person. I've never bought a lottery ticket. I've never done any kind of gambling. I like to be safe and secure and setting myself up for the unknown.
Got it. All right. So I think I'm going to take us on a different topic right now. Angela, speaking of your blog, one thing I like about it is that it kind of feels like a lifestyle blog, which is different from other personal finance blogs that I've seen lately. So you have tons of recipes on there. You have hacking, like camping, and you have gardening stuff, which is really cool. So do you want to tell everyone a little bit about what you write about? And then we're going to dive into one particular topic that I thought was so cool, and that's the truck. But we'll get into that in a second.
Okay, sure. I guess I've read a lot of personal finance blogs in the past 5+ years, but I also read gardening and more that kind of lifestyle blogs. And I find that the ones that I can come back and read again and again are the ones that are a little bit more personal and kind of have the whole picture. Like, I'm just like everybody else in the personal finance community. I absolutely love when people share numbers and spreadsheets and, really dive into the nitty-gritty details of finance. But I also really like to hear about what people's lives are really like. I know it's a little easier because I'm not trying to be anonymous in any way, but I can't really break the finance part of my life away from the rest of it. I mean, gardening is a really fun hobby, and it wasn't that cheap to start with because I spent a lot on heirloom seeds. But it's getting to be the point where, it is saving us money. It is a frugal hobby. And same with baking and cooking. A big part of keeping our expenses down and not spending thousands of dollars a month on food, but still eating good stuff, is finding good recipes that are tasty and interesting. And travel is a big part of our lives, and a part that if we're going to do a lot of it, we have to do it smart and not spend a ton of money. So to me, it's kind of all connected, and it's hard to just pull out one piece of my life to write about.
What's your favorite recipe that you have on there?
The chicken teriyaki one is probably up there just because I've had a heck of a time with Asian recipes and getting them to taste right. And one of the only restaurants that we have within walking distance of our house is a teriyaki shop. And we used to pick that up like weekly at least. So whenever I can find a recipe that works that we can cook at home instead of buy out is one that, saves us a lot of money, and it gives me a lot of satisfaction of being able to do a good job with the meal.
All right, let's talk about the camping hack.
Okay.
So tell us about how often you camp. It seems like you guys are pretty expert campers, and how you do it really cheap.
Okay, well, to start with, I actually never camped growing up. My very first camping trip was the summer before college. We spent a lot of time outdoors and in the woods, but we would always go home and sleep at home or sleep in cabins. My husband, on the other hand, grew up. His parents took him and his brother backpacking when they were still both in diapers. Like, walked in 3 miles to a campsite, hauling 2 toddlers and diapers. So he has a lifetime of experience of camping. And so once I started, I found that I absolutely loved it. My degrees in environmental science, I'm a really big nature person. I was a park ranger for 6.5 years. So being outdoors and in nature is something that we all enjoy. And camping is something that, at least in the Northwest, you can really do year round. It may be a little cold and a little soggy in the winter, but it's also the off season, so places aren't really busy and we can kind of just pick up and go on a whim. We do a lot of ferry travel out to the peninsula and up to the San Juan Islands. And in the summer, the ferry lines can be 2, 3, 4 hours or more long. And so in the winter, we can just kind of decide Saturday morning, hey, we're going to hop in the truck and go out and go camping for the weekend. And so we really like the flexibility of that. And with camping versus renting somewhere, A, it's cheaper, and B, there's always availability. We can kind of just spontaneously go and pick a place to stay. We've done a lot of tent camping, but more recently, my husband has a F-250 truck that he uses for work, but we've also started camping in it. This past summer, we got a canopy for it, so the back is covered, and we have a air mattress that goes over the wheel wells, so it's big and wide enough for the 3 of us to sleep on. And then we've got some cool LED lights on the inside, and our most recent purchase was an electric blanket. This month in February, it was 34 degrees overnight, I think, and we were toasty warm sleeping in the back of the truck because we had the electric blanket on.
I love that.
Yeah. It's pretty funny. In the campground, we were the only ones the first night sleeping in anything that wasn't an RV or a trailer or something really big and expensive. But I'd have to say we had a fabulous time, and it didn't really matter where we were sleeping as long as we were warm.
How much was the canopy?
It was $1,100 installed, which I guess it's like a $3,000 or $4,000 canopy new plus install. So my husband found it pretty cheap somewhere, and it's like a maroon color, and his truck is black, so it doesn't match. It's not perfect, but I actually kind of like it because it kind of gives the truck some character.
Very nice. When you guys find camping spots, I think you do campground camping where you have to pay, but you also do a lot of dispersed camping. How do you find those spots?
Right. Well, some of it is just knowledge of the area and having an idea of where things are at. But my husband's godfather does a ton of dispersed camping, so he's got a lot of tips on where we can go. And then we also look at maps and look at the topography and look where there might be like a big flat area that might be a good spot for camping. So, I mean, you can kind of look at a map and get an idea of where to go.
For those of us that don't know, what is dispersed camping?
So basically on Bureau of Land Management land or public forest land, pretty much anywhere you can just go and set up camp for free. Depends on where it is, but generally you can stay in one location for a week to 2 weeks. Yeah, you basically just pack in everything, pack out everything, and you're kind of free to hang out as you will. We did a trip down to Arizona like 5 years ago in the truck, but we slept in tents. But we drove like 40 miles from the nearest town and just kind of set up camp in the middle of nowhere in Arizona and had a fabulous time and didn't see anybody and just kind of hiked around and hung out.
If you don't want to be looking at a map and determining flat topography, is there a website that lists these?
I'm sure there are, but we've never used them. Basically, if you just Google dispersed campgrounds in your area, I'm sure there are people that will give you hints, but we've actually never gone that route. It's more just been, trial and error. Also, you just look at where there's public land and you can kind of just drive out until you find a spot that looks good. That's kind of what we did in Arizona. There was this big giant, and they've got like thousands and thousands of acres of public land. And we kind of just drove along the dirt road until we found a spot that looked like a good place to set up camp.
Actually, now that I'm asking you this, I think someone in our Facebook group shared a link to a dispersed camping website the other day. So if you're not in our Facebook group, go check it out. Good information is shared there.
Yeah. So dispersed camping, though, there's no bathrooms, there's no water hookup, there's no electricity. So you really do have to pack in everything that you need. And water is a really, really big one. It doesn't seem like it, but it's something that everyone always underestimates. Like, always bring more water than you need. You don't want to have to pack up and leave early because you've run out of water.
Yeah, that would be super unfortunate.
And it happens a lot. Like, we will camp with other people and we purposefully bring extra because we know that the other people won't bring enough water.
Okay, so that was totally my husband and I one time when we went camping with our friends in Colorado. We didn't bring enough water and it was really hot and we have a huge dog and we had to totally take our friends' water. But they brought extra because they're those type of people.
Yeah.
Those are good friends to have. We're going to link to Angela's article. She has over 100 women who write about personal finance online listed. So I'll let you describe it really fast, Angela.
Okay, sure. A while ago, a lot of the bloggers out there have their kind of blog roll of all of their favorite personal finance folks that are also writing. And one of the bloggers that I've read for a while now had one up, and he had one woman on his list of, 20 or 30 or more blogs that he reads. And someone in the comments suggested one other woman and then asked, did he know of any other women bloggers in the finance sphere? And he said, no, he couldn't think of any. And so that got me thinking that I could list quite a number just off the top of my head. So if that list didn't exist, maybe I could put that list together. I'd originally thought it would top out maybe around 30, which is kind of showing the bias that even I am used to, just because, the typical fire blogger is a techie guy, right? I mean, Mr. Money Mustache is one of those. So it definitely seems to have started out that way. But even I kind of expected that number to be 20 or 30. But then I posted it and just had this outpouring of people saying, oh, but look at all of these other women that are in this space, and even women that I had read. And so this list is now at, over 100, and it's bloggers and podcasts and just absolutely fabulous information out there. And there's just so many women in this space.
So this list is awesome. And this is how I suggest that everyone use this list. If you are rattling off a list of personal finance bloggers to recommend to somebody, maybe check out the list, throw in a female. That might be great. Because as Angela mentioned, sometimes people just don't even think about it, and then they'll be recommending stuff and they just forget. It's not malicious. Or if you have a platform, you have a blog, you have a podcast, and you're thinking, oh, I want to invite somebody on to do a collaboration or a guest post, maybe check out Angela's list, see who's there. Or if you're just listening and you're like, I'm not a content creator, I just want to see who's on there, then we're going to link to it in the show notes and check it out because it's awesome.
And if there's anyone that should be on that list that is not purposeful, this is totally inclusive. This is not one of those blog rolls that is special that you need to jump through hoops or be special or liked or anything. I want to include all the women that are out there in this space so that people can go and find a comprehensive spot for all the women. And it is broken down between fire bloggers and dinks and sinks and dual incomes with kids and single income with kids, and fire as in financial independence, optional retirement, and general finance and debt repayment. So if you're looking for a specific type of blog, it's separated out so you can really look and find someone that's most similar to you if you want to learn about women that are blogging in that space in particular.
And it's been well received. You've gotten crazy traffic on it, right?
Yeah. There have been a few notable male bloggers that have really lifted up the list, and I just want to shout out to Physician on Fire for including it in his Sunday Best. And PF Beaks was really great at sharing it, even at the very beginning before it really got looked at by anybody. So there are some guy bloggers out there that have really stepped it up and used their platforms to share, and that is very appreciated, that it's not just the women.
Aw, thanks, guys. All right, final two.
Okay, final two. Angela, how can people get a hold of you if they would like to continue this conversation off the podcast?
Yeah, so I blog over at Tread Lightly, Retire Early, and then I'm on Twitter and Pinterest and Instagram, but Twitter is my absolute favorite because that's really where the personal finance community seems to hang out. And I've really gotten to know some really great folks through that platform.
Awesome. I also second Twitter. It's amazing. Okay, and then the last question. If you could do anything in the world, have your wildest dream come true, no matter how crazy, what would it be?
So I've been listening to this podcast since you guys started recording. So I've listened to, 50 episodes of people answering this question. And
Thank you.
So I've spent quite a bit of time thinking about it. And mine's kind of a weird one, and it's definitely a wildest dream because I don't think there's any possibility of it coming true, but would be to somehow get the entire world really charged up about climate change and get people to actually change their lifestyles and make it so that we put a hard stop on what we're doing and protect our planet.
That's an awesome answer.
It's a little different. It's bigger than me, and it's really why when you ask when do I want to exit the workforce is I don't really, because that's what I'm doing in my job, and that's what I think is really most important on the grand scale of things. So smaller, wildest dream would be to be able to keep doing what I'm doing, but get to travel more and maybe get a chunk of time, a month or so at a time to be able to go and really explore and get to have more local type experiences other places.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Angela, for coming on. We really appreciate it. We will link to everything in the show notes. And I mentioned our Facebook group in the episode. If you want the link to that, just go to our website, firedrillpodcast.com.
Hey everyone! Today's sponsor is Olivia from the Birds of a Fire blog. She writes about financial independence and hacking luxuries for way less. She's a 25-year-old woman who lives in New York City, is a spreadsheet and programming nerd, and saves a whopping 70% of her income. She believes everyone should be able to retire early, so she created a free 20,000 plus word financial independence 2-week email course that comes with a super in-depth spreadsheet so you can save more, invest better, and retire sooner. You can find her and the course at birdsofafire.com/firedrill.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Go to our website, firedrillpodcast.com, to continue the discussion and get the link to our private Facebook group.
If you like us, leave us a review on iTunes. If you're like me, you have no idea how to do that. So, in the podcast app or in iTunes, search for Fire Drill Podcast, find it, click the reviews tab, and write something to make my mother proud of me. We read every single review and want to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts for making this podcast possible.